going to be talking about the unit circle, and I'm going to be talking about quadrant 1, which is going to be like positive signs. So how I'm going to explain this is that in the unit circle, you just have to learn the first quadrant because everything else comes together later on, because everything else is just the same as the first quadrant. So we're going to start with this first one, which is pi over 3. And then it's going to be pi over 4 here, and then pi over 6. Yeah, and that's going to be talking about now the second quadrant of the unit circle. And this one's going to be pretty much the same as this, so I'm going to move everything over. So pi over 3, 4, and pi over 6. And in the second quadrant, we want to remember this is a trick on how to memorize the gradients for these. So for this one in second quadrant, it's always going to be 1 less than the denominator. So obviously, 3 minus 1 is 2. 4 minus 1 is 3, and 6 minus 1 is 5. Next thing we're going to talk about is the third quadrant. So this one's going to be a little bit different from the first quadrant, but it's going to be the exact same numbers that you see here, but it's going to be like opposite order. So if you think about it like a pizza, like if you fold a pizza over, these ones are going to be flipped over. So instead of starting with 3 here, we're going to start with 6. So we're going to do pi over 6 here, pi over 4. Just for a heads up, pi over 4 is always going to be in the same position. The only two numbers that really change, like position, are 6 and 3. So like if you get confused, just remember 4 is always going to be in the middle. So. And then this is going to be pi over 3. So in the third quadrant, like I said about the second quadrant, that's going to be less than the denominator. In third quadrant, it's going to be 1 higher than the denominator. So it's going to be 6 plus 1 is 7. 4 plus 1 is 5. 3 plus 1 is 4, and that's how you get the third quadrant. So we're going to be learning about the last quadrant, which is the fourth quadrant, and this is going to be the exact same thing as the third quadrant, where it's going to be flipped. So it's going to be 3 here, 4 here, and then 6 here. And in order for you to find the numbers, this is a trick. If you get confused, how it works at just look over at second quadrant, which is kind of like the reflection over. And if you take note of 5 pi over 6 and look at pi over 6 over here, what you want to do is just add 5 plus 6 is 11, and that's where you get this one for the 6. And then over here, the 4, it's going to be 3 plus 4 is 7. And then for here, for the third, it's going to be 2 plus 3, and that's going to give you 5. So we're going to start with finding the gradients for the center ones right here, so the top, bottom, and the sides. So this one is 0 first. This is going to be 2 of them, but I'll explain why. So it's going to be 0 first because you're starting at 0 when you go, because a circle is 360 round. So you're going to go here, and then you're going to start from here, and then you get pi over 2, and then you go here, you get pi. And on the bottom, you get 3 pi over 2. And then when you make a full circle, it's going to be 2 pi. Okay.
Okay. So this is another way of looking at the unit circle. As you can see, it still has pi over 4, 3, etc. as one that was previously taught. However, we can relate it using degrees. This is 0 pi, which is 0, and also 2 pi, which means here it is pi. But because it's a circle, all the way around is 360 degrees and 180 at half. That's why we have pi over 180. Pi is the radians way of measuring units in the unit circle, but degrees is just the degrees version. So when you say pi over 4, that's actually half of this quadrant right here, this quarter, which means it's actually 45 degrees here. The angle, or theta, would be 45 degrees. If you say or 1/6 of 180 degrees. 1/6 of 180 degrees is 30 degrees. And this is just 30, 30, because it's 2. Pi over 3 is pi over 6 times 1 over 2, or I mean divided by 1 over 2. So it would be 60 degrees. So you can go around the whole unit circle in degrees instead of radians to find the equivalence. So I can just do that really quick. 45, and then, but 1, 2, 3, 45 degrees is actually, let's see, 90, 135 degrees. And this 60 twice would be 120 degrees. And then here, it'd just be 180 minus 30, which is 150 degrees. So that's the top half. So now I'm going to go over the bottom half, which is basically this up here, but twice, because you've already gone around once, and you're going around again. So, like before, if we start in the middle, 90 is 270, because that's another quarter. Quarter, a quarter, a quarter. That's 270 degrees, or 3/4 of 360, because it's 3/4 of the way around. So you can do that with these others. 180 degrees is already here, because this little slice here is 30 degrees. It's the same size. We can just add 30 to 180. So you can just have 210, because this slice is 30. This slice right here is 45, so you can add that on to 180. So 45 plus 180 would be 225 degrees. And then with this one, we can either subtract 30 from 270, because that's how far away it is from this part of the slice, or you could add 60. I'm just going to subtract because that's less math for me and I'm lazy, and I will have 240 degrees over here. Then for this, it's pretty much the same thing, slightly different numbers. So I have to start in the middle because that's more basic, and you'll just add 45 to 270, so you end up with 315 degrees. 360 minus 30 is 330 degrees. And then 270 plus 30 is just 300 degrees. And you can use these to relate to each other. This is 30 degrees of a slice. This is 45. 45 minus 30 is 15. 315 minus 300 is also 15, and that's how they relate to each other.
So now I'm going to teach you guys how to find the coordinates of each radians. Alright, so we're going to work on the first quadrant first. So for the first quadrant, x and y coordinates are all positive. So the trick to memorize is, for the first quadrant, the y coordinates we'll start at 3, square root of 3 over 2, and then the easy way to memorize this is just 3, 2, 1. Keep in mind that's for the y coordinates only. So we have 3 for the y coordinate there. We have 2 for the y coordinate there. And we have 1 for the y coordinate there. When I say 3, 2, 1, I refer to the numerator values only. So we have square root of 3, so 3, square root of 2, 2, and then 1/2, 1. So that's for the y coordinate. And if you look at for the x coordinates, if you prefer to choose the x coordinates, you can memorize it as 1, 2, 3. So as I said earlier, now I'm going to be working on the second quadrant. As I said earlier, for the first quadrant, the y coordinates will be in a sequence or pattern of 3, 2, 1. It keeps the same, except the only difference is because it's a second quadrant, the x values are negative and the y values are positive. So as you can see, we have negative 1/2, negative square root of 2 over 2, and negative square root of 3 over 2. Okay, so now we're going to be focusing on the third quadrant for the coordinates, alright? So for the third quadrant, what you need to know is that the x and y values are negative. We have the negative x-axis here and the negative y-axis here. So keeping in mind that the pattern goes 3, 2, 1, this is for the y coordinate points. Keeping in mind that the pattern goes from 3, 2, 1, on the bottom half of the third quadrant, as well as for the fourth quadrant, it'll go from 1, 2, 3. And lastly, I'll be talking about the fourth quadrant. So for the fourth quadrant, your x and y values, the x values will be positive and the y values will be negative. So keeping in mind with the pattern that I said previously in the second and third quadrant, the y coordinates will be 1, 2, 3. So as a recap, the y coordinate pattern, this is strictly for the y coordinate, not the x coordinates. It'll start from the top, from quadrant 1 to quadrant 4. It'll start from 3, 2, 1, and 1, 2, 3. The same goes for the second and third quadrant over here. From the top, it'll go from 3, 2, 1, and 1, 2, 3. And one thing that you always need to remember is which coordinates will be positive and which coordinates will be negative. So just keep in mind your quadrants. First quadrant's all positive. Second quadrant, only the x coordinates are negative. Third quadrant, both x and y coordinates are negative. And for the fourth quadrant, only the y coordinates are negative.